So here we are talking about stonewalling. The last horseman in the 4 horsemen apocalypse that will pretty much predict if these are going on in your relationship, you're headed for a breakup. So stonewalling. Well, what is that all about? It's when someone completely withdraws from the conflict and discussion and is no longer responsive to the partner. Now, this can be typically women like to close off. And I know I'll often say, if I'm mentioning women or men in that particular topic, it's because that's of the feminine nature. It's the feminine essence is often women will close off and men do not like that. So where there's often opposite energies, where the man is in the more feminine and closes off, it can be the same thing. But we can all be capable of all of this. It's just men and women are different. And that's what we, I guess, can start with and appreciate and understand more about the opposite sex and understand them. So back to talking a bit more about stonewalling. And it usually happens often when someone is feeling completely emotionally flooded or overwhelmed. So your reaction is to shut down, stop talking, and disengage, which can be a form of the fight, flight, or freeze. And when couples stonewall, they're under a lot of emotional pressure, which increases heart rate, releases stress hormones into the bloodstream, and can even trigger, as I said, again, more of that fight, flight, or freeze response. And what happens when we go into fight, flight, or freeze? Again, the subconscious kicks in saying, I'm not safe. I need to get out of here, protect myself. The blood literally drains from the brain, goes to the extremities, i.e. your muscles, because that's where it's needed for the energy to get out of there. And when that happens, it shuts down part of the brain, the hippocampus. That's responsible for storing events as a memory, and thinks that these things are still going on at some point, which is why when you are highly stressed and emotional, you have to be very mindful of the conversations you're having and the decisions you're making in that state, because often nothing good will come from that because you're in a place of fear and doubt and feeling unsafe. So you'll make decisions from that place. So what can we do about that? Let's find out. The whole idea behind an antidote to stonewalling, which is basically psychological self-soothing, not self-sabotage, is we have to have calling time out. And so couples need to be interrupted after about, I think the research shows about 15 minutes of an argument, and then be told that they need to adjust their emotional equipment as such, to not talk about their issue, but instead just to chill out, relax, and take time out for at least half an hour. So I'll just recap that. After 15 minutes of getting basically nowhere or having an argument, you need to double that time and take half an hour of time out to do nothing, not thinking, something mindless, like just read a magazine and just flick the pages or something like that. Go for a walk, get out into nature, do something else to change your state. Then come back and start talking again. And you'll also find then that your heart rate has dropped back down. You've come down to a more state of peace and calm, done some self-regulation, which again allows your fight, flight, and freeze response to settle down. It brings the body back to peace and calm and deal with those stress hormones. You're in a much more positive and productive state to have a discussion. So what can happen in that half an hour as well of time out? Each partner could potentially be just, while they're soothing themselves, they're able to maybe discover some little epiphanies or aha moments about what's really going on and get back to this rational state and enable them to take that emotional charge out that's really fueling, well, there's no discussion going on because we've shut down, but it's enabling us to then come back to peace and calm, gather our thoughts, and have a more adult, responsive conversation than reactive conversation. And therefore, the self-soothing can be anything to do with nature, grounding, but just importantly, allowing time out and at least half an hour to come back and regroup and just see, has your position even changed on what you're actually trying to talk about, the discussions? Because there's a fair chance you might be able to even see things from a different point of view. And I wonder if you could even try even swapping seats when you come back in from that time out, and literally imagine that you are sitting in the other person's seat hearing just what you've said. And how would you feel or respond to that? Another really good trick to do or tip is to imagine that you're sitting next to your best mate or your best girlfriend and you know them intimately, you've spent so much time together that they're asking you for advice about your very situation. And so what advice would you give to them? What would you tell them to do? And I wonder, would you be able to take some of that advice on your own advice to get you out of the situation? So it could sound something like this when you come back. Look, we've been through this over and over again, and I'm tired of reminding you the X, Y, and Z, what's going on. And then your partner says, well, honey, look, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm feeling completely overwhelmed and I need to take a break. Can you give me 20 minutes and then can we come back and talk? And if you take your break and if you still find yourself or your partner stonewalling or bottling up your emotions, you'll just end up exploding, speaking from a place of anger, hurt, hate, wherever, sadness, and you'll get nowhere that's going to be any good or helpful. So when you take a break, it should be at least for 20 minutes. So it's the psychology and physiology of your body has a chance to return to peace and calm. Do some mindfulness activities if you can. But it's crucial to avoid thoughts of righteous indignation and staying positional in that time and saying things like, I don't have to take this anymore, which is a little bit, again, as I said, it's very positional, or sounding like an innocent victimhood mentality. Could be something like, well, why is he always picking on me? Spend your time doing something soothing and distracting, like listening to music, reading, exercising, dancing, bike ride, kick a ball, whatever it is, but do something that actually changes your state, your focus, and the language that you're talking about at the time. It doesn't really matter what you do, as long as you calm down. Go for a swim, do something crazy like go and jump in the ocean when it's really cold to shock your system and bring you back to now. Be really present with what's going on. So often people think it's because they can't communicate. But why they can't communicate is because they were doing one of those 4 things. Or they had arguments about money, or they had no sex, or a bad sex, or arguing over the kids. The topic is often less important than the way we're dealing with the topic. So if you're finding yourself dealing with your stresses in the relationship of one of those 4 horsemen, then maybe it's time to stop and start implementing some of those tools, those antidotes. So I wish you well in releasing the 4 horsemen into the wild and embracing all those antidotes.